Vicki! You're muted.
Oh,
You're all right now.
okay. You missed my very exuberant battle cry.
Well, let's go for it again. Vicki!
David Arthur!
What time is it?
Dry bones!
It is time to dry bones.
Already?
Yeah, I know. This week went like...
I know. Weren't we just here?
Yeah.
I know. Crazy.
It went by so fast. And so everybody out there, you can expect this next week as well. And then on the week of the... I don't know why, but I only thought there were 2 Tuesdays in between last week's show and the 30th, but there's 2. So, Lord willing, you're going to have a panel every Tuesday of this month, except for the 30th. And on the 23rd, which is 2 weeks from today, there will be another special host, panelist, filling in for me, actually, because I will be out of here. I will be somewhere in the woods of Maine trying to get renewed, seeking my time with the Father, because I need it desperately.
Yep.
And if I don't get it now, I won't. So, anyway.
Yep, you need it.
Yeah.
We can't go constantly. We were not designed to keep that up for long periods of time.
And, I said the other night, I say, the trips get longer and longer. They get harder and harder for some, not for some reason, but because I'm getting old probably. But the trips are getting harder and harder. But the last trip that I went to Ohio, 3 weeks ago, I have not been able to get any more pep in my step. So it is what it is, whether it be spiritual or physical or both. It is what it is. And on the 20th, I am out of here, taking a hike for a couple weeks. And there will be no shows, no morning shows. I will be on Dry Bones on the 23rd. Nada. Zilch. I'm going to be in the woods with the bears and the moose. And that'll be that. Oh.
Good.
Amen, Ian. Amen. He said, often one mirrors the other. Yes. That is what happens. The physical and the spiritual. And it's all there, believe me. Regular. But I don't want this to be about that. We are blessed once again to be joined by April Lockhart and George Carneal. And so we just have all this amazing stuff that we've been talking about, right? And I don't even know which mouse to grab anymore right now. But we were talking a little bit before the show about what even just the LGBT movement itself, right? What it has morphed into, what it has become. And it's definitely what it has become right now is not what it was. All right. And I know that we think with a lot of things, we're like, well, nothing is ever going to be the way it was or what it was. It's always going to grow or progress. But this isn't even progression to those who are in the LGBT movement, right? I remember when I was going to Arkansas to meet the father of the boy from the movie. Just escaped my mind. the movie about conversion therapy. Garrett, wow, the movie anyway. And so it was a true story. And Garrett wrote a book, and then the book became a movie. And his very Southern Baptist father and mother were in the church. It was made to look, kind of off. So I went down to Arkansas. Anyway, I was going to Arkansas to visit with this pastor, and I'm in a hotel, and I was sitting in the lobby, and this very lesbian older woman was sitting in the lobby, and we got to chatting about traveling and the weather. And she's like, "So where are you heading? What are you doing?" And I told her, and she's like, "Oh, what do you speak about?" I was like, "Well, let me tell you." So I started giving her testimony, and she kind of stops me after about 10 minutes. She goes, "I am a lesbian." I said, "Okay, that's nice." And I kept giving her testimony. And
you said, "Okay, that's
listen
nice."
to the whole thing, right? And by the end, we were actually having this amazing conversation. And she said to me that the transgender movement is after the children and don't belong in the schools. And I was like, well, yeah. Why won't anybody else speak up? She says because they feel almost like they're betraying their community if they do. Because then the drag queens who are the homosexuals, right, who just get up and drag for the fun of it. She said then the drag queens who are a part of their community will, it's too messy for us to really speak out about this kind of stuff. And I'm thinking the whole ride back, I'm like, why? If more of them spoke up, it would be so easy for us to stop drag queen story time, to stop the LGBT curriculum, right? If more of them stood up and said, listen, you don't want your children learning about oral and anal sex. It's dangerous, and there's tons of health hazards from it. If they would speak up and say these things, gosh, imagine the power, that there would be to stop some of these things that are taking place, and some of the targeting of the youth that is going on. And I'm not saying that homosexuals are predators, and I'm not saying that homosexuals are pedophiles and child molesters. What I'm saying is that this spirit of perversion has enveloped all of us. And what I'm saying is that probably 98% of the people that hear my voice were or are sex offenders, even if they haven't been caught yet. That's what I'm saying. So it's not an LGBT thing, right? It's a perversion thing, which is like what we were talking about with the Q, right? The Q that's been added, queer, how queer is trying to get rid of lesbian, and queer is trying to get rid of other things, because now they just all want to be queer, because if they're just queer, then they're just crooked and they're not straight and they're whatever they want to be.
Yeah, I feel like the queer erases the gay and the lesbian, because you have to be you have to at least admit you're one of the genders, right? Because in order to be a gay man, you have to be a man. In order to be a lesbian, you have to be a woman. No matter how you decide to pose as, maybe maybe you like to wear dresses and lipstick, or maybe you like to be a little more rough, but you're still a woman. You're not denying your femaleness, but when you identify as the Q, you're just something floating in the middle, or nothing at all. I've even seen things as crazy as sexless aliens. Have you guys seen that?
Yeah.
I mean, it goes that far, where there's a guy who goes around and he's very proud of the fact that he has no gender. And I don't know if he went through with the operation, but he was talking about having his genitals removed.
Right. We played that.
And
we played his a video clip of him, and it got censored. But yeah, he was talking about he just wants to have a hole there. And
it was really frightening.
Yeah.
He looks very frightening to me. If I was a kid, I wouldn't go anywhere near him.
No, and the whole time I just remember saying, like, dude, if you ever hear this, even if you just have a hole, you're still a dude. You're still a male. You know, all these operations and all of this stuff that he did to his oh gosh, my heart breaks when I seen him. It just breaks because he is just so lost. He's diving so deep into the depths that, you know, I can't even fathom that and understand that coming from what I came from. You know, when we were in the LGBT movement, it was just the LGBT movement. And even me as a tranny, we didn't use the term transgender. It was never transgender because that was a new term. It was transsexual or tranny. It was pre-op or post-op. You know, I'm a pre-op TS. That's what I was, and I knew a couple post-op TSs. But guess what? We all knew that we were male, and those who were female knew that they were female, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you had men living as women, dating women that lived as men, having intercourse, and the woman getting pregnant, and it looked like a male walking around with this big old pot belly, but they knew that they were male and female. They knew it so much that they had intercourse so that they could have babies, you know. And we never had all that confusion back then about, well, I'm really a woman. And no, we didn't even say that amongst ourselves. We were like, yeah, you know, so what? I'm a guy, but guess what? I mean, I remember standing on the corner and guys would pull up in a car and I'd be like, I'm a man. And they'd be like, you know.
Well, and sort of to everyone's point, what we were talking about before we went live is, you know, the power of the LGBT community, the strength in their power is their unity. And the more they dilute, the more letters they add, the more A, B, C, D, E, F, G it becomes, the more it includes everyone who has any sort of a sexual deviancy of any kind. Like now the furries want in on this, you know, hey, I think I want to dress up like a fox and have sex with people who are dressed like a raccoon. And so I need to be in there. And, you know, I don't know if the powers that be understand how much power they're going to lose when this just becomes a massive come one, come all group, because the power for cultural change that they're able to inflict right now is because they were unified on this very narrow purpose. And if it just becomes every dysfunctional, low self-esteem tween out there who's bored and looking for a goofy identity, they're going to lose this power for social change. They're going to just implode from the inside out.
And they are losing that. Actually, there's statistics show that in the recent years, the LGBTQ XYZ plus, you know, they have literally lost respect among their heterosexual peers. There was a time when people were feeling like, yeah, they really are in victimhood status, and we need to stand up for them. They don't need to get queer bashed, and like that used to be a real thing, right? But now I think because of just how off the rails they've gone, polls show that people really don't support the LGBTQ issues anymore because they've just gone. The pendulum has swung too far in weirdness.
Yeah.
That
it has.
They're losing respect.
But see, that's what happens when you go into the libraries looking like some kind of demonic, you know, character.
Yeah.
And you read deviant stories to children, and you have all these pictures of them with their legs open and like no panties and pantyhose on and all kinds of crazy stuff, you know. And so when these, like, people would send me the articles, oh, you should talk about this. Well, no, I'm not going to talk about it. Why don't you just let them do what they're doing? Because what they're doing is destroying themselves. You know, every time one of these articles gets posted, there are parents who aren't Christian who are saying, not my baby, not my baby. I bet you not my baby. That's what's happening.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I say go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, George. Go ahead, George.
I was just going to say, years ago, even before I fully left the life, I saw the handwriting on the wall, and I told my friends, I said, they're going to shove this down the throats of Americans to the point of where there's going to be a backlash, and people are sick of it now. And it is going to come to bite them in the rear end. The corporate world has hijacked the movement. You're right. They're throwing every kind of degeneracy, everything you want to be. You can go marry a library, have sex with dirt. And they're throwing all of this under the LGBT umbrella. And I know there's one lesbian on YouTube. She's so mad about it. And she's so sick of the transgender thing. It's hijacked the women's rights. I mean, you've got it's starting to implode, and people are sick of it.
There's so much internal dissension in the ranks, George. I've noticed that we've got feminists furious that transgendered men are now taking over as the women leadership in feminism. We've got transgender, we've got men competing in women's sports and dominating in female sports. And we've even got, if you guys ever read the comment sections, like with the Desmond is Amazing, there are drag queens, who do that kind of stuff for a living, in the comments saying, this is horrendous. This is not what we're about. You're making us all look like we just drug little kids and take advantage of them. And so there is a lot of a coming apart at the seams, which is, the impression that is given through mass media to us on the outside that don't know any better is that this is a tight-knit community. Community is the big buzzword. And I just don't think that it is as tight-knit anymore as it perhaps once was.
Well, I think April would probably agree with this. I don't know about you, April, but even when I would be in West Hollywood, and it was a very segregated community. The lesbians stuck to themselves, and the gay men stayed in the bars, and they didn't congregate with each other. And that's fine, because the women were looking for what they wanted, and the men were looking for what they wanted, and everybody minded their business, and you didn't have all of this insanity. And the straight people stayed home, or they stayed in their own bars. Now it's just it's a nightmare.
And even that right there that's how it was. Lesbians had their own bar, right? It was the lesbian bar. I don't even know what it was.
Or it was lesbian night. So it was like a bar that it was known as a gay bar, but there would be lesbian nights like on Tuesday nights, and then like Friday nights was like gay bar, and maybe there was a Saturday night where everybody comes. But I mean, we did sort of had our own little
enclave or
groups.
just
But see, it's even like, okay, say Bangor, Maine, right? Like nowhere USA, right? Bangor, Maine. So when I was in the world, I used to travel all over the nation. So I came to Maine, and Portland and Maine Bangor had a homosexual bar and a lesbian bar. Well, now Bangor has no homosexual specified bar and no lesbian specified bar, and because all bars are open game, because everybody goes, because now in every bar they have the homosexual bartender, a transgender bartender, a female bartender, a lesbian bartender, because now they're just trying so hard to appease everybody because they don't want to get sued or shut down or picketed, right? So they try so hard to appease everybody, and now they're at their limits because now they can't appease all these people. They brought Desmond is Amazing. They brought him into a nightclub at 2:00 in the morning. He was dancing in a nightclub in Brooklyn, New York, stripping, doing a strip tease, and men were throwing money at him. But not all the men in there were throwing money at him, because a lot of the men walked out of there and started hitting Yelp and Facebook saying, I can't believe what my eyes just saw. Why would you ever bring this little baby into a nightclub? Why would they do that? That's way beyond my my comfort zone. And they were tearing this club apart on Yelp. So
there was one drag queen on YouTube who was talking about that, and she had said that, or the drag queen was saying that, why would, even saying to the parents, why would you have your kids look up to drag queens, really exposing what life is like in the drag world and in behind the scenes with the sex and the drugs and the alcohol and stuff. And I lived with a drag queen, so I know what that world is like. And I was so glad that he was such a voice of reason, trying to get parents to understand this is not something you want your kids to look up to, and the kids should be left alone.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think what's funny is that even when I was in it and was an advocate and, you know, was on the floats and all of that, the two things that always stuck out in my head is that I never believed that homosexuals could get married. I never believed that. And I totally, completely never agreed with homosexuals raising or even having children. And I mean, call it, you know, whatever, but after what I faced when I was a child at the hands of homosexuals, and after what I saw in that movement as a homosexual and then as a tranny, I saw children being lured in and seduced in, and you know, and now it's like they have all these names for them, twinks, you know, and the emos and the twinks, and they laugh and they say, well, I'm an old wolf, or, you know, and see, it's different when it's a woman who's a cougar, right, going after young guys. There's no real issue there in society. But when it's an older man going after a young boy, everyone throws up their hands. They want to get pitchforks and torches and just take him out because he's a pedophile. That's the most disgusting sin ever. He should go to prison. He should have his stuff cut off. He should be this. He should, you know, they're going to beat him up and all this. And so when you think about it like that, I know a lot of kids who were raised in homosexual homes where their parents knew that their friends were touching their kids or messing with their kids, but they overlooked it because they were their friends, you know. And that's just sad. Well, and if I had kids, maybe I would have overlooked it too, because in my mind at that time, back then, in my mind, it was normal for adults and kids to, it was normal for me at that time. I didn't see anything really wrong with it.
Well, and I think, David, the mainstream agenda has gotten a little more sophisticated. They're not overtly out there packaging this lifestyle to teenagers as deviant sex or pleasure. I mean, in some cases, yes, depending on where you're going. But what I think is diabolical is they're going to the lowest lying fruit of where we all were when we were teenagers or preteens. We have these identity issues. We don't know who we are. We truly believe we're the ugliest, most unworthy, misunderstood person on the planet. We don't have the friends. We're not popular. We're not this. And it really is appealing to this. We accept all of the outcasts, you know, and it's such a drive. And I wonder how many of these kids go into this not even realizing that the price tag at the end of this is they're going to have sex with people, you know, and they're thinking, I'm going to have this community. Someone's going to love me. Someone's going to understand me. I'm going to have friends. And they're willing to pay whatever price in the end to get that once they've gotten a taste of it. But I was listening not all that long ago on YouTube, and it was some interview between RuPaul and Adam Lambert. And I was thinking, if I was listening to this at 12, 13, 14 years old, I would think these men understand me. They know what it's like. They've been persecuted. They've been hurt. He eloquently spoke about his becoming so confident in his identity as who he is, RuPaul, that he doesn't even have to dress in drag anymore because he'd come to grips with who he was. And it was beautiful. It was like a sermon. And so it's being packaged in this love yourself, accept yourself, self-confidence, friendship, community. And I just wonder how many kids realize that they're going to be, their purity and their innocence is going to be ravished by the end of it. And there's going to be then consequences on their identity from the result of those choices that were bigger than the identity choices they had to begin with.
But on top of that, notice, at least when I was out and I was especially in the gay community in West Hollywood and what have you, there was always the message of HIV and safe sex and stuff. And there were really a lot of warnings about all of the sexually transmitted diseases. In my later years, you didn't hardly hear of any warnings about it anymore, because gay men were living longer with all of the cocktails, those drugs that they would take. So it was almost like men who were living 20 and 30 years, even after their diagnosis, no one cared anymore. And I knew of gay men who started to sleep with men who were HIV positive, because they knew that once they became HIV positive, then they could just sleep with whomever they wanted. And these young kids don't realize not only the danger of these sexually transmitted diseases, but for those of us who came out in the 80s, and we saw so many of our friends, how this disease ravaged the community and so many of our friends died, and watching them die this slow, miserable, horrible death, it was just so heartbreaking. There's no fear in even the sexually transmitted diseases, and noticed it just gets swept under the rug by the media.
Even in California, speaking to that, I know in recent times, very, very recent, I want to say maybe a year or two ago, when I lived in California, it used to be a felony if you knowingly slept with somebody and passed HIV. And now the way that they changed the law, because they don't want to discriminate against the gay community, they actually changed the law to where it's no longer, it's not even a misdemeanor. It's like a wobbler. It's like, it's worthy of a ticket. You go to court, you say I did this, and then you pay your fine. So, I mean, that's how loose the morals, and that's how like lawless, I'll say, lawless California, Hollywood in particular, has become. It's not even a big thing anymore. So you could pass it on knowingly and know that there's no consequence.
Back in the, in the 80s, as a matter of fact, going into the 90s, when HIV was such a big thing, there were two types of people. Now, I was positive since I was 14. But there were two types of people, and they were called gift givers and bug chasers. George just described the bug chaser. The guy that plays Russian roulette with his life, and he goes out and he has random anonymous sex with people trying to get the bug being HIV. The gifters or gift givers were the people, that's what they called the people that were going out and that had HIV and were spreading HIV. They were calling them gifters and gift givers, as if actually telling them that you're doing a wonderful thing. You're giving somebody a gift. I mean, that's basically what they were saying. They're saying they were calling them gifters and gift givers. And the guys that were, trying to get it were bug chasers. And those are two very real types of people, even in today's world. And right now, because of this on PrEP nonsense, which is an antiretroviral medication, right? A medication that was released as an HIV medication. And it's now being given to kids, high schools and college kids, to take on a regular basis because it prevents them from getting HIV. Ultimately saying to the kids, if you get on PrEP, then you can have sex with whoever you want, whenever you want, and you won't catch HIV. That's what it's telling.
Yeah, like if you use a condom, you won't get pregnant, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I remember I met two random guys, and thank God before I slept with them, they admitted they had herpes. And I'm just thankful that they had a conscience and told me that. But, when you're young, you think you're invincible. It's not going to happen to me. It happens to everyone else. And until these kids really see what it's like to have these sexually transmitted diseases and what comes with it. How else can you wake them up? But there seems to be no discussion about that anymore. You hardly hear anything about HIV or AIDS in the media. At least I don't.
And it hasn't gone away. That's the thing. It's like this idea that, oh, we got it under control and it's gone away, but that's not true at all. It's still rampant and it is an issue.
And everyone's getting it now. It's just not a death sentence anymore.
Right. And it's been destigmatized.
Yeah.
But
and what they tried to do when I was living in Ohio is they started I think it was Cincinnati that came out with the headlines how HIV is on its rise because of IV drug users.
Oh.
Right. So it's just HIV is still running rampant because of IV. Now it's the drug addicts' fault, but it's not sexual.
They need
not the LGBT.
You had to
it's a
put
monkey
face to it.
Yeah. You know, I mean, it's just that's how it is. So, I mean, I know because I actually go to ASOs, which are AIDS service organizations, and I have friends that work there and all kinds of. This is how I get information. Like that's how I found out that the new age limit for hormone blockers and puberty blockers and hormones at the Barbara Bush transgender wing of the Barbara Bush Hospital in Portland, Maine is now 8 years old. But because I have these kinds of connects, but the HIV population is steadily on the rise. On the rise. Because now they're putting information out there saying that if you're undetectable equals not transmittable. How dangerous is that? Because see, what they consider undetectable is anything under, I think, 250 parts. So if you have 200 parts of the HIV virus that is discoverable in your blood, you are medically considered undetectable. But that means you have 200 parts of the virus in your blood, right? Per part. So that means that you are very, that you can transmit it, that you can to somebody. So what they're saying now is part of the appeasement process, like how April said, well, you know, just if it's not a gay disease anymore, then they kind of appease the LGBT. And that's what they're doing with the whole undetectable. If you're undetectable, you're not transmittable, you can go ahead and have sex and you don't have to tell anybody. And hey, I mean, now they all know that all they can get is a ticket, you know? So
and the power of advertising, these STD medication commercials would be hysterical if they weren't tragic. You know, you've got these chlamydia and herpes commercials where, you know, you've got a woman in a doctor's office looking consternated, and then she gets this prescription, and then the last scene she's in the bar, you know, it's just like they make it look so easy. And, you know, you don't realize that in real life, you're probably, your back is aching and you're not sleeping and you're, you know, all of these side effects because of HIPAA. And I even wonder if part of HIPAA was so we're not allowed to communicate to people the horrible lifelong side effects of pain and medication and surgical procedures and aches that people have to go through as the consequence of being so hard on their bodies. And I think these kids just think, well, I'm going to pop a pill and it's going to be like getting over a cold and then I'll get back at it. And it's just not realistic.
Yeah, and by the time they give all of the side effects from many of those drugs, you know, you're almost like, well, you could have heart disease, kidney failure, depression, suicidal thoughts. It's like, good grief.
Like, I know, the depression, suicidal thoughts. It's like, well, I was already suicidal.
Right.
Before I got on this medicine.
So how do you know if it's the medication making you
you don't. Yeah, you don't know if it is.
Yeah. It's
absolutely
crazy. There's no consequence in anything anymore with the way that they have made a medicine for everything. But you could say that for everything now. There's no consequence to any of our decisions, our choices, because there's a pill literally for everything now.
Yeah, it's like the Jetsons.
So,
and it's just sad because most of those kids are unable to look at any of this from a spiritual perspective as well. So it's just sad on many levels. And I don't know. I just wish older gay men and lesbian women, or older gays and lesbians, would just get very honest about that life. Even if they are not religious, just be honest to come out and say, look, in the beginning, it's fun. It's new. You're meeting people. You feel safe. It's a new thing. There's this high from all of the fun, the partying, and what have you. But they need to be honest about when the reality of that life sets in, that it really does not bring any happiness or joy or full contentment, And there's still this ache as to why so many they're in that life, but they never seem to find that real satisfaction and don't even bother to ask the deeper questions of looking at it from a spiritual perspective. It's just really sad.
It is, George, and that's one of the things that kind of torments me from my vantage point, where I have young friends just getting into this and still thinking they're rock stars because they haven't hit any of the consequences yet. And youth is a drug, man. You can just stay up all night. You just don't know what 35's around the corner. It's a big difference from 17, right?
Oh yeah.
But I've heard so many testimonies, and George, you've talked about this, and it seems like one of the commonalities between a lot of testimonies of people who come out of it is, I knew for 10 years, I knew for 20 years I was miserable, but I would fight for it. I would tell people I was happy. And how do you break through that self-denial when you are trying to befriend and love someone, and you're hoping to save them from 10 extra years of that, but they cannot see it or they won't admit it? Like, is there a way to tap into that and bring that out so that they can be rescued from 10, 15 more years that the moths get to?
The way I drive it home is this, and this seems to kind of work. Or maybe the light will go on. I just let them know, fine, stay in it for 10 more years. Right now, you are the new hot meat on the market. In about 10 years, when your looks start to fade and your body's falling apart, and especially for the trans males, and this is not that I'm being hard-hearted towards them. It's trying to get them to see that right now you're young, you look great in makeup, you can pass for a woman. But once you're 35, 40, 45 years old, you're an old man dressed up as a woman, and no real man who seeks transgender individuals is going to want to have sex with you when there's new, fresh meat, 18, 19, 20-year-old boys who look like girls who are dressed up. What is the end goal for you? An old man playing a woman the rest of your life, or an old woman trying to pass as a man the rest of your life? And I'm not making light of it. I'm telling you, even when I experimented with cross-dressing and I had men hitting on me, because when I was younger, I looked good in makeup. And so, but I had the sense enough to know this is a fantasy. And it's not like I can go to bed with them wearing a wig and makeup. That wig will be all over the place. And I knew that if some of these men, I could tell by their conversations that this was beyond, they weren't dealing with reality. And I knew I'm going to have to follow a lot of restraining orders because some of these guys are coming off a little nuts. Just conversations
you attract nuts. That's why. Yeah.
Exactly.
So I had enough sense to realize this is going to lead down a road that is, to me, this is too dark, and this is going to get crazy, because there are people who are not operating in reality, and I'm not making fun of them. Some people really have some psychological issues and need help.
You know why, George? Because what you attract when you are a man trying to portray a woman, right? What you attract are men who are so angry at themselves for being attracted to men, but also a woman, right? And some of them, because listen, almost every single guy that used to come to my house had a wife or a girl at home and had kids at home. They were family men, but they were demented. They were demented because they had a wife and a family at home, and they still wanted a man. They wanted a woman with a penis. They wanted a woman who could control them. They wanted a woman who could top them. Okay, that's what they wanted. And when you're living in it, you think it's all fine and dandy, but not only what are you going to look like when when you're 50, 60 years old, but what about the side effects?
Mm-hmm.
All the silicone that you get pumped into your face and into your body. A lot of them kids, they don't have a clue that silicone shifts, it travels, and it falls.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have a clue that all the hormones that they're taking cause all kinds of internal damage, not let alone osteoporosis, cancer. I had severe osteoporosis. I'm talking hunched over on a walker. Couldn't even stand up straight for 2 years. Couldn't stand up straight, and I knew that I did it all to myself, right? So that's why I'm always like, because people are always like, well, that's like that's because that's your punishment because you did this and it was wrong, so God punished you, and AIDS was God's punishment, and no, AIDS was not God's punishment. So osteoporosis was not God's punishment. That was my recompense. That was my reward because I chose to do those things, and that was my recompense for my choices. That's all that was. But oh man, George, I so wished to actually be able to tell those that are in this now. I mean, when I get to go into the high school, I'll tell you what, that's such a blessed experience, because when I tell them all of the side effects and the outcome from hormones and from that type of sexual activity, when I tell them about colon cancer, and when I tell them about not having any sense of feeling, and not knowing if you have an infection because you don't have any feeling, so you don't know you have an infection until the infection is severe. When I tell them that, they just look at you like, wow, and they kind of look at other people and it kind of gives you the clue or the hint of who's actually engaging or identifying, right? Or going down that road, because the way they look at each other and look at other people and look at you, and that's what they need to hear.
But that's the sad thing. You've got pastors and Christians who refuse to get people like us into these schools and into the churches to warn these kids, because they have the attitude that if we talk about it, we're going to plant the seed. And I can't get it through their heads that they're already being programmed with this, not only in the public school system, but by the media, the music, television, and the film industry. They already know about this stuff. And that's why, David, with all of us, on our stories or whatever we've been through, they need to utilize us to scare the crap out of these kids, to give the cold, hard, honest reality check about this life, or anything. If you decide you want to go out there and be promiscuous and live the bar life, even if you're heterosexual, the danger of hooking up with strangers, the number of murders and rapes and suicides and all the drug overdoses and everything that comes with this life, we're just lucky we survived it.
Amen.
And back to your question, Vicki, about how do you approach, how would you detour that young person if you were to have a conversation? I always think about if I were to go back in time and have a conversation with myself, and I was lucky enough that I was able to have a conversation with an older lesbian who came out, by the way, and she was very frank with me, and it scared me sober.
Wow.
But I have had conversations with younger girls, 14, 15 years old, where they knew about my past. I try to be open about it, not weird, but just, I try to be an open book to people. And I've been approached by girls ages that, where you're just starting to experiment, where you're getting into that phase in your life. And she kept telling me, it always would boil down to feelings, right? With lesbians, it's a little bit different. We feel, we have all these emotions and feelings, and our relationships are very flowery, and we want to move in with each other right away, and so we're hyper female is what we are. And I remember she was saying how she was just felt so in love with this girl. It was like her best friend, and they just you know, it was, and I understood it. I understood it very well. I was like, I know what you're feeling is very powerful. It's very strong. It's probably an emotion you've never felt for a man before. And so but here's the thing. Who you are right now as a 14-year-old is not who you're going to be when you're 35.
Right.
It's not going to be who you are when you're 40, because who I was when I was 14 was all about the way I felt. Like my feelings trapped me. It was like a prison. I couldn't get out. I couldn't get past my feelings.
Right.
But as I got a little older, realities began to set in. I was like, wow, if I continue to operate on my feelings only, I'm going to be destitute, old, alone, and probably dying with no family, nothing I'll have no fruit to show for. Where it wasn't just about emotional depression, but I mean, reality of the world set in. You're not going to be beautiful forever. You're not this beautiful creature, and everybody wants you forever. And I began to realize that what this woman was saying was true, was when I was already on to my third relationship. And so this is where lesbians tend to be different than gay men, is we're not out looking to have sex with 1,000 people in one night. And I'm not trying to be crude or anything, but we really just, a lot of the lesbians just want to find like a real nice girl, and they want to settle down, they want to buy a house, and they want to have maybe 2 kids, and they want to do that thing. But for me, I kept getting my heart broken, like by women that I was like, man, these women are taking me for everything. Like, I love them. And I just could not have my heart. I was tired of feeling a knife in my heart. I couldn't do that again. Yeah. And like women, we have the natural tendency to want to emotionally bond. Like when we engage in a physical relationship, we bond tight. Like that's a woman's love language. And so every time that bond would get solidified, it would get ripped, and it would just devastate me. And when I was talking to this younger girl, I was like, look, here's the thing. The world will try to put a label on you. Don't accept that label. You may feel like you're a lesbian right now, but I want you to be open about, look, you say you identify LGBT, then be open about your sexuality. And if you can be a lesbian in 5-10 years from now, you may find that doesn't work for you. You can be straight. So it just depends on what label that you want to accept. And I'm here to tell you that the way you feel now, okay, maybe I can't change your mind, but in 10 years, you may not feel that way, because I didn't. Right. You know, if I could change, it's a possibility for you. So I think with this whole LGBT, open-minded, all-encompassing, everybody's welcome in, use that to your advantage when you're speaking to that young person who comes up to you and says, you know, what's the truth? The truth is that if you say you're open, stay open then. Because this is an opportunity for the voice of the Lord to come in and minister to your life. Be truly open.
Right.
And Vicki, I would like to say to that, I think one of the hardest things for me was I wished there had been more testimonies out at the time that I was in the life, to where I had older gay men being honest about that life. And I've talked about this many times. When you're sitting in the bar and looking at the older men sitting there getting drunk and nobody wants anything to do with them, that was the cold, hard reality check of what I knew was going to happen to me. Wow. So I didn't have someone talk to me as much as, thank God I was observant and in my head all of the time. And I think God was really working on me and getting me to see, this is the end of your road. If this is what you want, there you have it. Because as April was talking about your feelings and emotions, and maybe I'm more feminine in that regard, and that I really wanted to make an emotional connection with a man, and you want to find something solid and stable, and you want to grow old with that person. But like I said last time, you know, men can have sex and be completely detached, and I could certainly do that as well. But when you so desperately want something to stick, and it's just not happening in the gay community. And I would see all of these wonderful gay men that I knew. They were good looking, successful, had good careers, and seemed like nice gentlemen, but everyone seemed perpetually single. It's just like, I got so impressed being around gay men, because it was a constant reminder of this ache in my heart. And that's why I walked away from the gay community. I was tired of it. And I stopped having sex with men and stopped hanging around gay men and left the bar scene before I was fully committed to Christ. I was tired of being reminded of the ache and the lack of contentment in this life that was bringing me no joy. I didn't know what was going to fill that void, but thank God I had the sense enough to go, I'm done with this. This is not working.
Wow. You know, I just want to say right now, and I hope it doesn't come off corny because I mean it with such authenticity. There's so much stuff out in the news. Anytime someone comes out, or anytime, you know, Bruce Jenner puts on a dress and he's brave, and we hear this word brave, and we hear courage. And the more I get to know everyone on this call, the more I hear their stories, the more, you know, deeply vulnerable you become in the details. To come out of that lifestyle where it's your whole life, it's your community, it's your identity, it's all of your friends. The only community ready to embrace you is known for being pretty judgmental and bumbling and not knowing how to be loving. And I think to leave everything behind, like Abraham, on blind faith, you have this image in your head of some sort of promised land. You have no idea where it is or how long you'll get there. That is the people who should be getting the Courage Awards in my estimation.
You know what, though? Before the show, we talked about a lot of stuff. I mentioned being at the parade in Columbus and actually confronting the older homosexuals, the old school lesbians, the old school homosexuals, right? And presenting it to them like, look around you. Do you really think that all of these young people belong here? These thousands of kids, and even the older homosexuals were like, well, no, they don't belong here, but they're looking for something or someone to embrace them, right? And that's what we do. We accept them. We embrace them. So that's why they're here. They don't belong here. They definitely don't want to get involved in all this, but they're here because we embrace them. I remember when Tom Dunn and I were making the documentary, and I witnessed to the first transgender in Atlantic City on the corner. And I said to him, I gave him a little testimony, and he let me pray for him. And it was one of those moments, right? And he said, I know I'm not supposed to be. I know God didn't create me to be this way. And I said, well, why are you? Then why do it? And he looked at me, he said, you know why? Because it doesn't matter how much of a mess I am. They embrace me. And that's the point. The church. I'm not talking about just a bunch of people in a building. I'm talking about the church.
Right.
Needs to get it together. Because I know when I first came out, look, the first church I went to, let me tell you, I have never seen so many nasty, evil, wicked people in my life. And I'm talking about where I just about did everything but flip the table and cuss them out. Okay? But I snapped. And I remember the pastor, it's actually Chris Kane's dad was the pastor of that church. And I said, Pastor Cliff, you need to get the hell out of here. They're demons. They are demons. I said, you need to burn this building down and write Ichabod all over it. And he just looked at me because I snapped that one night in a Bible study. I just snapped. I went off. And I just told them the way it was. And I remember driving home. I walked out of there. I was ticked off. And I walked out and I got in my car and I'm driving home and I'm going, really? Really? Those are your people? Those are your people? Lord, if those are your people, I don't want anything to do with your people. That's what you took me out of my safe zone. You took me out of an atmosphere and out of a persona, right? That I would have known how to handle them people. But you took me out of the place and the persona and the character that I was, where I would have dealt with them. And you put me in a position where I didn't know how to deal with them. And if that's your people, I don't want any parts about it, because I just came from a family. I just left a family. And that's how I looked at the LGBT community, as my family, because that's what they become, right? They become your whole world, your family, your everything, because you get shunned from your own blood. Yeah. So I'm like, I just left my family for that?
Right.
No. And, you know, I don't like to say the Lord spoke to me, but I will say it was almost audible. But I definitely know that he said to me, you are going to spend some time with me. And that's what I did for a year, year to a year and a half. I spent time with him alone, with his word, right? No distractions, no one teaching me and telling me what the scripture really means, right? Just spiritual eyes, not already learned, not taught, not traditional eyes, spiritual eyes, spiritual awakening. And I remember that how it was so almost audible that he said he was going to deliver me. And April, this is why I'm so big on the effeminate thing, because he said he was going to deliver me. And at that moment, I didn't know what deliver meant. I thought, like Peter, he's going to deliver me somewhere, you know, like Peter after the eunuch. Like he's going to deliver me somewhere. And I'm thinking, where am I going, right?
Like a pizza delivery?
Yeah. I know he can do it, right? Because I've already read the stories in the book. So I know he can. Yeah. He already delivered Peter. He just took him. Hey, Peter baptized the dude, and then Peter was gone, right? He was out of here. And I'm like, where am I going? And then it was like the clarity came. And he told me he was going to deliver me from each of these things individually. And the spirit of effeminacy was one of them. And I'm like, wow, I was super ultra feminine, right? I mean, like ultra feminine. I remember standing on the tier in prison one day, and the officer stopped, and it's like, wow. He's like, I watch you all the time. And I looked at him, and he goes, you're more feminine than my wife. And, you know, I mean, how do you respond to that? But that stuck in my head. I was ultra feminine. And he told me I needed to be delivered from that, because if I wasn't delivered from that, then I wasn't a good representation of him. And it just took me to a whole nother level, because that was probably the moment that I knew I had an intimate relationship, an intimate bond with my father. Right? And because of that, and because of what that moment means to me, that's why I'm so hell-bent, as they say, on men being men. You know, and that, so I mean, that should explain a lot for you, for, you know, me and you, April, we've had that conversation.
Yeah.
Sometimes. But
I remember having being spoken to by the Lord, by the voice of the Lord even in my own life early on, when I was in that repentance phase. And I remember the Lord very distinctly in my mind saying, you need to write everything down that I'm telling you, and you need to keep some pictures of yourself, because I'm going to do a work that's so great in you that people are not going to even recognize you when you walk on the streets. They're not going to believe you that you came from Babylon, because the stink of Babylon you won't even smell like Egypt anymore. There won't be a trace of it on you. And I just remember thinking, like, kind of almost that rolling my eyes at God, like, well, what do you mean? Am I going to be walking around with pink dresses and flowers? You know, because it was very butchy. And so this is me. If you don't see this is me being a rebel, because back in the day, I used to wear all black and like dark makeup. I was super into the gothy scene. And now I'm like, this is me being rebellious. This is me saying, Satan, you didn't win.
Yep.
Because I'm super comfortable wearing pink, which I wouldn't be caught dead in pink. Okay, I was the kind of girl you wouldn't catch me dead in pink. And not only will I wear, I'll wear pink blush and flower hats, and you know what? It doesn't make me feel. It doesn't do anything to my power as a woman. It doesn't take away from my image. It doesn't make me a weak woman. It doesn't do any of those things because I'm so comfortable in who I am. I could wear whatever I wanted, but I like that God told me that early on. He said, I'm going to do a work in your life so powerful, nobody will believe you. Lest you have some pictures and some good stories. You better keep some proof.
May I add, my father has an old vehicle that he took out of the junkyard and he's been putting it together. And one time I was helping him, and I don't care anything about cars and all that crap. And one time I had to get underneath the car because he couldn't, and try to screw some things. And here I was working with a wrench and a screwdriver. I didn't even know what those things were. And I felt so manly. I was like, oh, this is what it's like to be a man.
Yeah.
And just merely putting a screw in something, I just thought, man, I'm a man today.
You've arrived.
It's little things like that I even going to church and bonding with men who are so comfortable with their sexuality that they're not threatened by me. They know my story. Certainly nothing sexual is going to happen, but when they hug and embrace me and I'm having this fellowship with these godly Christian men, it just feels something in me because it's so nice to bond with men without sex being part of the equation.
Right.
And when you've spent 25 years in your life in bars where all you know is being around men and knowing that potentially sex is going to be involved, it has really been an adjustment just learning how to be around Christian men and knowing how to fellowship with men and what it's like to be a man, to think like a man. And I don't know, I've really enjoyed the process, but
there's something to say about when God removes like that predatorial spirit in you, where every time you build a relationship with the same sex, it's always has to be about like, I remember one of my guy friends would always say, April, why is it that all your female friends always have to be like these attractive, alluring women? You can't just have like a normal friend. Why does there have to be something all extra about them? It's like, because I was always trying to sleep with them all the time. I was never trying to build relationships with women where, I could just hang out with her and not be scandalous. I always had to have like some woman that would make me feel better about my identity, that would make me feel like I have better self-esteem because look how pretty she is, And it was always about like this predatorial relationships were so predatorial all the time. I was always looking to get into someone's pants, and to not feel that anymore is kind of amazing, that I can just have a friend and not have some ulterior motive behind it, where I can just love somebody and that's it. And I can really just love them and not have to take it to another level.
Absolutely.
What I think about when you say that, it makes me think like, for me, it was absolutely just that, predatory. And but for me, it was really like just try and do whatever I could just to get them. And then once I knew I could have them, I didn't want them anymore. And it was because I was going after men who had girlfriends and who were, like the big drug dealers in the neighborhood and or pimps that were out there pimping girls. And I would go after them. And then once I knew I could have them, I just wouldn't want them anymore. And it was, so for me, it was just always about just another, that's it. I can't believe that popped in my head, that old Pat Benatar, just another notch in my lipstick case, right?
Oh, gosh.
Literally.
Yeah.
But that's what it was. For me, it was, like I always kind of had the hope and dream of finding Mr. Right, but I didn't care if I did or not, because for me, it was like Mr. Right now. It was, that's it. It was just about, I remember saying to somebody, and being really serious and sincere about it, I said, well, please, I was like, if you just want to do it, we can just do it, because it's nothing. It's like shaking hands to me. It's like, it's like greeting somebody. It became the whole sex thing became so impersonal to me.
Yeah, and that's sad.
Yeah, that it was just like shaking hands with somebody. I mean, it's
David, may I
explain that?
May I add, I think the danger in staying in that life for so long and being promiscuous, at least for me, was the more you continued to find heartbreak and the more that people broke your heart, the more that you tried so hard to have relationships and everything just kept failing and falling apart. It really made me so hardened to the point of where I had no regard for people's feelings. I would curse them out in a minute.
Yeah.
Because that life it will really thicken your skin and harden you to other people because you're so tired of being hurt. For me, it has really taken a process for God to soften my heart and not to be so quick to lash out at people who hurt me, because when you're in that life, David and April, you know what it's like. You just get so hardened because you're tired of having your heart broken. And that's the downside to this free love and sex thing, because if you're looking for something more, you've got to learn to detach.
Yeah.
You quickly have to give up on the dream of finding anything real where somebody's going to stick with you thick and thin. If you had parents that stayed married like mine did, I come from a legacy of people who got married and they stayed married until death do us part. That was a real thing in my family. And I so desperately wanted that. And I had to abandon that idea. And I thought to myself that it's not in this community. If it is, it's so rare that if you found it, man, and I'm not, because I do know some people who have stayed married for a pretty long time. That's not the norm. And that, stability is just not a thing. And what you were saying, you said something, David, that you were looking for Mr. Right. And I think for many of us, we're all young and doe-eyed. We're looking for that Mr. Right or that Mrs. Right early on. And then we get really jaded and we realize, like, after you've had your heart broken so many times, you just stop looking for the Mr. or Mrs. Right, because you've in the back of your mind, you kind of know it doesn't really exist here. So I might as well get what I can. So, I could be as promiscuous, just be as promiscuous, sleep with everyone you can sleep with, because who knows what's going to be for tomorrow, right? So
I used to get a lot of
that's where the sadness and the double-minded and the depression and the anxiety, that's where that all comes from. And that's why you have to drink so much. You have to be perpetually drunk as often as you can. You have to go out and party. You have to get all the getting that you can get, because in the back of your mind, it's just not going to be anything real and solid. There's no rock to stand on at the end of the day. And I think, I wish I would have discovered that younger. I wish I was almost, I wish I wouldn't have even spent a decade in it. I think a decade is not that long compared to some of the other stories I hear, but for me, it's too long. It was way too long to stay there for a decade.
I lost 25 years of my life.
And
25 years.
I don't look at it as though I lost, 30 something years. I don't look at it like that. The way I really look at it, especially from the beginning, was like, I was just like thankful, right? I'm thankful I'm rescued. I have a father, right? I'm like, I have a father. And I would be like, it was boot camp, right? I'm like, gosh, it was a long boot camp, but it was boot camp nonetheless. And you allowed me to forego this type of training, right? Instead of the type of training your other soldiers do, where they get to actually live it their whole life, right? And so I'm like, you allowed me to make these choices and to do this because this was a more specific for such a time as this, right? And it is more specific. And I know that everybody that I know that has ministries thinks that their focus and their goal is the big answer, and it is for them, and for their ministry. But you know, we see that same aspect, right? We say, well, guess what? The world is going gay, right? So who better to be able to stand up and step up and say, let me tell you,
Yeah.
because they weren't out there by the hundreds and hundreds like they are now. When I was growing up, when I was in it,
Yeah.
they weren't. I mean, I ran across one person my entire life, and it was in prison, and it was my first time in prison. And I remember it was I almost said an old queen. It was an old transgender who was, you know, male, who lived as a woman, who gave it up, and Jesus had rescued him. And I remember he was sitting at the table and he was playing cards, and it was just like the intake prison, like the first one you go to, and then within 3 weeks you're assigned and shipped off to your permanent facility. And so I come in, and I had my little bag of stuff, and then somebody was carrying my stuff. And I remember he looked at me and he goes, oh, I guess I have to sit down and talk to you. And I looked at him like he was crazy. And I said something probably like real smart, you know, sarcastic, probably just nasty. And I remember he said to me, I paved the road for you to be able to do what you're doing right now. And if I want to talk, you're going to listen. And I mean, of course, I just ignored him, right? And but I heard him telling somebody else, because he had breasts, and he said, you know, and he was telling somebody else about how Jesus this and Jesus that, and this is what I dealt with, and all this kind of stuff. And I just remember hearing him tell somebody about it, and I was just like, oh, please, you know. My reaction was, oh, you just couldn't handle it as one of the girls, you know, so you just bailed out because you couldn't do it right, and you know, that kind of arrogance. And that one person was the only person I ever came into contact with that had been where I was. And who knows how many, you know, people could have intercepted, you know, like you said, April, 10 years, a decade was too long for me. But who knows if, you know, how many people could have intercepted those years and made them a lot less just by stepping up and telling you their testimony, or even believing that their testimony has any power.
And may I add to the Christians who are listening to this, what saddens me is that when I was a kid, I never heard a family friend or a Christian or a family member ever say something positive about homosexuals in this way, that if they knew of one, that they would still treat them with respect and they would love on them, but still point them to the truth of God's word in love, sending a message to me that this is someone I could talk to. This is a safe place for me. And because I did not know where I could go, I had to battle this in my head by myself and to try to figure this out. What would my life have looked like had there been someone out there who was sensitive enough to stop and just ask themselves, here's this kid on the playground. He's by himself. He plays by himself. He swings by himself. He's alone. He seems very sensitive, effeminate. Let me try and reach this individual and talk to him. If there had been someone that I could have safely been able to describe and to discuss what I was struggling with, how that could have possibly changed the course of my direction, but there wasn't. So it's almost as if many of us are pushed into that life because the rejection is from everywhere and no place is safe. And you just feel like, well, let me go into this area. At least I'm safe. And with all of its dysfunction.
Yeah, can you imagine, George, if there were some men in your church when you were young who could spot you out and say, yeah, that one looks a little troubled. Let's take him under our wing and let's help him. And let's if he doesn't have a father figure, which a lot of these young boys don't, let's be strong male characters for him, and let's help build him up and let's make him feel encouraged to be a man. Like being a man is a good thing.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing. And, you know, but you didn't get that. And I think there's even women who don't get that. And instead, what people in the church will do is, you know, call you that, you know, they'll call all the derogatory terms. So now you feel all shut in that you don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
You just want to play in that corner by yourself. Hopefully nobody will discover you.
Pansy, sissy, all that kind of nonsense.
And that's why if Christians could be, I don't like politically correct. I don't like political correctness at all. But I think in this regard, it's important to be mindful of what you are saying because I was a kid who listened to all of the adults. I learned early on, you've got to be safe. I knew how to walk to different classes to avoid the bullies, how to hide behind the taller kids. I got very slick and very smart about how to survive in this jungle of where I was being attacked at every turn. Had there been some Christians who maybe just threw it out there. Well, I know that if my child ever said to me felt they were gay or lesbian or trans, yes, I would still tell them the truth of God's word and love, but I would let them to know I love you no matter what. And I'm going to be with you on this journey, and I'm going to help you figure this out. And God loves you. If we had only heard these kind of messages, how it could turn so many lives around for these kids who are hurting.
Let me take that even further, George, because, you know, for a situation that's completely outside of yours, like mine, I didn't grow up with Christian anybody. Okay, there was no Christian nothing in my home, and I remember, and this is a good lesson for our brothers and sisters out there who do go out in the streets and evangelize. But I remember standing on the corner one night. It was about 2:00 in the morning. And I had on, well, it doesn't matter what I had on, but I was definitely out there working the street, working my corner. And I remember there were 3 Christians coming across the street at me. They used to come out there every once in a while. But when they walked towards me, I put my hand in my pocketbook and I said, if you say a word to me, I'm going to gut you like a fish. And then they didn't say a word. They just to the next corner right across the street and started talking to whoever was standing on that corner. And when I came out of that movement, I remember thinking, whew, good thing they didn't say anything to me. I probably would have stabbed them, gutted them, and been in prison again. But then I started looking at it differently when I read the word from cover to cover and kept going back, and I'm learning about, wow, how powerful our testimony is. Jesus called us to be fishers of men, and we have to bait them and reel them in. We catch them, he cleans them. It was so simple, right, when I read it. And I'm like, then I started looking at it like, wait a minute. What would I have done? If I walk up to somebody on the corner and they say, if you speak to me, I'm going to gut you like a fish, I'm speaking to you. Okay? I'm speaking to you. And if there's 3 of us, you ain't going to get all of us. But I'm speaking to you. And then I started thinking, like, wow, what if one of them would have put his fear aside and spoke to me? Could he have saved me maybe another 10 years off of that 30 plus? You know, could I have come out of it back then and said, hey, I was only in that movement for 15 years, y'all. You know, I don't know, but it definitely makes me wonder, and it definitely makes me express that when I see Christians evangelizing out in the streets, especially in the hood, where they want to go to reach the most troubled, right? And that's all good. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you're going out there and you want to reach the most troubled, you have to be ready for the most troubling confrontation. Yeah. And that's a fact. You know, so you know, it's just when you talk about a man coming in and seeing and noticing, I didn't have any Christian men in my life. They're, you know, the only men that were in my life besides my mom's boyfriend was men who were taking advantage of me, you know. That was it. So I didn't have that, and there was no expectation of that, and I never could have even expected that. So, but for me, it was very much that. Well, wait a minute. What about those Christians that came up to me when I was on a street corner? What if they would have actually spoke instead of just moving on to the next one because this one's just a little too rough?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And that's why I don't understand the Christians who do go out there in the street evangelize and say such things like, you know, AIDS is an abomination and you're going to hell. Well, yeah, we know there's some truth, but there's a way in presenting your message that, for me, what I wish Christians would understand, that if you walked to a gay pride parade and merely said, may we give you a hug and pray for you, most of them will break down because most of us are not used to being treated with any decency. That's how you get somebody, is just by hugging them. So most of us are so deprived of hugs and loved and being seen and respected. That's how you reach that person. And I remember being in West Hollywood at the Gay Pride Parade, and I saw some Christians with a huge cross, and they had a sign on it that said, we're sorry for the way the church has treated you. Now, I remember standing there looking at that, and I so badly wanted to walk over to them and thank them for just their presence and for being respectful. But I was with some friends and I couldn't. But it really, it just smacked me in the face because they weren't the mean-spirited, hateful Christians, you know?
Right.
When you're so used to being abused, like I could sit in a room with 1,000 people and they could all curse me out and throw tomatoes. Doesn't affect me in the least bit. I'm used to negativity. But when somebody says, oh, you're just so nice and warm and godly and loving and we just love you, it makes me so uncomfortable because I'm not used to that. But, you know, so that's why if you go to these gay pride parades, tell them you love them, you're praying for them, hug them, just be kind to them. They'll melt. They won't know how to handle it.
If you bring bottled water, that goes a long way because a lot of these people are very drunk in the streets.
Yeah.
And you can, you know, if they have the guts to stop and talk to you and give you an ear for 2 seconds, you give them a bottle of water, you know, help them get into their sober mind a little bit. But, you know, a bottle of water will go a long way, and a kind word will go a long way.
Give them a little tract, just a little something, just to let them know you are loved and valued by God. If nothing else, that will just set most of us on the edge because most of us have grown up in a church home or have been exposed to religion and some kind of faith, but we struggle with it because the dilemma is I want to please God, but I also want to love and be loved, and they both are equal in my eyes. And to be told I can only choose one is the most devastating thing that you have to hear from somebody. And I just couldn't hear it for the longest time because I thought I'll never be loved. No one will love me. I won't have anyone to love. But I knew that I also didn't feel good about thinking that I was displeasing God. And there was such a turmoil inside of me as a result of that. Wow. So I just wish Christians would stop and really think about what they're saying and understand who wakes up in the morning and wants to choose a life that is a hell to be in? You know, who wakes up and thinks, I want to make decisions that will put me into bondage, where I will be depressed and suicidal? Who wants to live like this? But we are struggling with something that most of us don't understand where it came from and how we ended up this way. And there needs to be a lot more compassion and patience because it's really tough to get out of that life.
Amen. Amen, George. Wow. Amen. You know?
And I don't think anybody does, George. Nobody wakes up and says, I want to be LGBTQ. Nobody's like, I don't think anybody does that. I think what's happening now, especially
the opposite, mostly is most people say, please, can I wake up and not be this way and feel this way?
Yeah, can I be I'd like to just be normal. But I think because in this day and age, they package it with pink bows and rainbows and unicorns. Do you notice like how they package the movement? They literally make it like eye candy. And this kind of goes back to that article that you were talking about, Vicki, which I love, by the way, because it has so many, you expose so many of the esoteric values of what's going on. But think about it. If you just throw some sugar and rainbows on it, kids love that. They will eat that right up. And I feel like that's what they're doing right now with our kids, is like, maybe they think they're gay, maybe they're not. But because of how the LGBT packages it, it makes it so the kids run to that. They love that. You know, it's eye candy.
Yeah.
And so I think that kind of like,
to read that article.
So true.
Vicki, I did enjoy your article. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Thank you.
That was great.
That was actually inspired by a show idea that we were going to do a while back, and we ended up not doing the show, but David suggested it, but it got my interest piqued, and the research was fascinating.
Yeah.
So since we actually have the author, David's not reading.
David, can you kind of get closer to your microphone, please, just so I can hear you?
Can you hear me now, George?
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Actually, since we have the author, David's not going to be doing any reading. Vicki will be reading this one.
All right. Let's see what I'm going to try to pull it up on my
Okay, yeah.
my inconsistently reliable phone, because my eyesight is just so bad. And I don't want everyone to get it like a full up the nostril shot with me leaning into my screen.
All right, well, you know what? If I do that real quick, I'm going to show a picture of why are our kids and youth doing and thinking the way that they're thinking, right? Because here you go, Kenyon College is giving out PrEP, HIV prevention with just 1 pill a day. It's coming to campus soon. That's why.
So easy.
Yeah. So you could take this pill every day and then you won't get HIV.
Yeah.
Or how about the summer camp for transgender children in California? As if that would surprise anybody, right?
Right.
Left coast.
Right.
How about this one? I took this picture myself of a flyer at Kenyon College. How to love, condoms, consent, and candy.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow.
Join us for story sharing, crafting, and sex toy raffling. And this was supported and hosted by the groups on campus. Major groups on campus.
Try to have a Bible on campus and you're thrown off.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
But I mean, hey, you know what? That is why they're so brainwashed. They're so stuck in the fact that because it's being drilled into them.
And they've made it so easy.
Yeah. And it's so popular and it's so wonderful and it's so amazing. And it's butterflies and glitter and unicorns and oh my gosh.
It's a dream. It's like not even in reality. It doesn't even look real.
No.
Yeah.
And it's nothing at all like it really is.
Right.
You know, and that's why the suicide rate, and I don't know if we talked about this last week, but the suicide rate, you know, that's one of the biggest arguments you get from the LGBT movement. Well, if you just teach them about it and then accept them, then they won't commit suicide. Well, that's not true. So what happens is that suicidal thoughts, right? The depression kind of goes away, but it's very temporary because there's this like euphoria of joy because they have some new acceptance. Hey, now my dad is taking me out and he's calling me Samantha, right? He's calling his son Samantha and he's buying me pink panties. That's my dad. Oh God, I love it. This is what I've been waiting for. And then in a couple weeks, guess what? Sam realizes that he's still broken, confused, lost, and hurting. And then he's not going to just attempt suicide. He's going to commit suicide. That's what's happening.
And I think what a lot of people don't realize, if you haven't kind of been in this victim, survivor, bullied place your whole life, what you don't understand about people that have been in survival mode for most of their life is we have a sixth sense about us. We understand that the person all the way across the room who keeps looking at us, we know what they're thinking. We know what they're whispering. We get it. We see these things. And there's one thing that I think, have extreme discernment in, and that is when we know when people are being authentic and when they're not.
Absolutely.
We know when they're flattering us and when they're not. And we know when, like, oh, Vicki, you look pretty today, and they can't look you in the eye and they're choking on it, like, you know. And so if all of a sudden, like, if you had come to me when I was in like my worst junior high years and I had braces and was having the surgeries and looked horrible, if people had come up to me 100 times a day and told me I was the most beautiful girl on the planet and I should be a model, if you didn't mean it, I would know it, and it wouldn't change the way I felt about myself, you know? And so just placating to people and telling them what they want to hear is not going to heal those wounds.
Amen.
Mm-hmm.
Amen.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Are you ready, Vic?
I am ready.
We are now. Yeah. Okay. I guess before we actually do it, I got tired of every time I shared a meme, or like I would just look up real quick, like images, rainbow, right? And I wanted like not a picture of a real rainbow, because I wanted all the, I wanted the brightness, vividness, the opaqueness of a meme or whatever they call them now. But I would share it, right, with make a little meme out of it. And then, you know what people say all the time? Well, that rainbow only has 6 colors, and that's the devil's rainbow, and that's not God's rainbow, and God's rainbow has to have 7 colors, and you should remove that rainbow, and da 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 da. And I'd be like, shut up. I'm like, it's a stupid little picture of a rainbow, right? It has nothing to do with what I said about it, right? It was just a little tiny symbol of a rainbow, and that's what it was to me. It was symbolic of a rainbow. I know God's rainbow has 7 colors. I know that, right? So I just wanted to know, right? I'm like, where did all this color, this whole colors thing come from? Well, Satan's rainbow has 6 colors and God's has 7. And well, you know what? You guys are wrong, because Satan's rainbow don't have 6 colors, okay? Satan's rainbow actually had how many colors, Vic?
I think it was 8.
Yeah, and then it was 6, right?
Then it was 7, then it was 6. 7. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So
all bottom line.
So here we go. One of Vicki Joy's articles, and she's going to read it for you.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, a little bit of background when David and I were talking about this initially back in April is, there are a lot of Christians up in arms, like, they stole our rainbow. It's a symbol of God, and they made it and they technically didn't, because the original rainbow flag was not the same as the bow in the sky, as you'll see. So that was some of the initial. What's that, David? It
wasn't even meant to be.
No,
they were trying to mimic God's rainbow, because they created this rainbow because each of the colors had a meaning. So yes. I'm going to shut up now.
Okay. All right. So this is on Real Dark News. It's called Rainbow Abjection. It's a little play on words from the Rainbow Connection, which is why Kermit's there. So contrary to popular belief, the LGBTQ rainbow flag is not technically a rainbow at all. By definition, a rainbow is a, quote, arc or circle that inhibits in concentric bands the colors of the spectrum, and that is formed opposite the sun by the refraction and reflection of the sun's rays in raindrops, spray, or mist, end quote. The spectrum is defined as, quote, a spectrum of light, a band of familiar colors that include red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and violet. The name Roy G. Biv is an easy way to remember the colors of the rainbow and the order in which they appear: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, end quote. So that is the dictionary definition of rainbow and spectrum. The rainbow that we see in the sky, the one created by Yahweh and used as a sign to seal the Noahic covenant, consists of 7 colors. The number 7 is referred to by biblical scholars as the number of completion, or the number of perfection. Another numerological fun fact: the Hebrew word for rainbow, kesef, contains 7 letters. The current iteration of the LGBTQ, quote, rainbow flag contains only 6 of the 7 colors of the spectrum. But even this is a modified version of the original flag, which contained a total of 8 colors. The flag designed in 1978 by Gilbert Baker was comprised of pink, red, orange, yellow, green, turquoise, indigo, violet. Furthermore, each of the colors represented, in Baker's mind, 8 very specific meanings. Hot pink for sex, red for life, orange for healing, yellow for sun, green for serenity with nature, turquoise for magic, indigo for harmony, violet for spirit. It is noteworthy that of all the colors selected, the one that gets top billing, the first color on that flag, represents sex, while none of the remaining stripes represent love. I find this extremely interesting coming from a community who decries any association with sexual deviance and portends to be about the freedom to love whoever you want. I also think it's interesting that the 2 colors that were eventually removed were the pink and the turquoise, the 2 colors that most closely represent the stereotypical colors that differentiate the 2 genders, girl and boy. But the things that make you go coincidences don't stop there. The official story is that the pink and turquoise were removed due to the high costs of hot pink fabric dye and the difficulty of finding and matching colors back in the late 1970s when the flag was designed. The flag hit another snag when attempts were made to hang the flags vertically rather than the traditional horizontal direction, and that due to the width of the stripes, the turquoise stripe disappeared when wrapped around the flagpole, which makes no sense to me at all considering the turquoise stripe was located in the middle of the flag, but I digress. Here's the part that fascinates me the most, and the reason why I think the pink and the turquoise stripes were removed. The pink and the turquoise stripes represent, respectively, sex and magic. Ring any bells? Aleister Crowley, anyone? For those who may not know, Crowley was an English occultist, most famous for inventing a philosophical system called thelema and his concepts of magic, especially sex magic. This is a quote. Sex magic, sometimes spelled sex magic with a K, is any type of sexual activity used in magical, ritualistic, or otherwise religious and spiritual pursuits. One practice of sex magic is using sexual arousal or orgasm with visualization of a desired result. A premise posited by sex magicians is the concept that sexual energy is a potent force that can be harnessed to transcend one's normal perceived reality. Gilbert Baker designed the flag to be a symbol or an emblem for the homosexual community. And whether wittingly or unwittingly, I know not. But I believe what he created was not a symbol, but a sigil. A sigil is a type of symbol specifically used in chaos magic. The general public is given one definition of a symbol's meaning, while those with esoteric knowledge of the symbol know its true interpretation. A sigil is encoded with a specific or a special purpose, and it is created, quote, with the intention of changing your reality in accordance with your will, end quote. Another way of saying this is people create sigils in order to manifest their own destiny. And lest you think that this is all a bunch of hocus pocus, there are celebrities and influencers out there who believe in this stuff with all their hearts. Take, for example, Kirk Hammett, multi-millionaire lead guitarist for one of the most popular metal bands in the world. Here's an ad for Kirk's Demonology guitar. Metallica's Kirk Hammett is fascinated by the strange and macabre aspects of life, evidenced by his custom guitars featuring classic horror art and paranormal phenomenon, most famously seen in his well-known Ouija guitars. The next step is his LTD signature series. It is the KH Demonology, a guitar powerful enough to summon the mightiest of dark forces. Over its black finish are a number of sigils, which are ancient symbols reputed to be imbued with magical power that allows the owner to summon demonic entities. Lest you think this is all merely Kirk marketing a metal image, here's an excerpt from a 2009 interview from Guitar World magazine. Kirk says, well, as far as symbolism goes, there are different schools of thought, like how colors can influence your mood or perspective. Different symbols like the all-seeing eye or the rose will trigger different things in your psyche or unconscious. All this stuff is influential on some level and has an impact on the person surveying it, whether on a quantum level or a more overt level. I'm really interested in that sort of thing, end quote. Notice how Kirk said that symbols are influential and can have an impact on the person surveying it. This means Kirk is interested in the symbols on his guitars having some sort of subtle impact or influence on the fans in the audience who are watching him play. Earlier, he states that colors and symbols can influence your mood or perspective. In other words, they have the ability to influence the behavior and the worldview of the masses. And this is key, without their knowledge. This, my friends, is nothing short of spellcasting. Back to the self-proclaimed gay Betsy Ross, Gilbert Baker. Baker, like Hammett, embedded within the very fabric of his multicolored sigil the words sex magic, as represented by the hot pink and the turquoise stripes. Was this an accident? Maybe, maybe not. I guess the real question is, did it work? If the ultimate aim of sex magic is to harness sexual energy in order to transcend one's perceived reality, did Baker's flag accomplish that? Did the homophobic reality of 1978 America remain firmly cemented in the foundation of traditional Judeo-Christian values after Baker unveiled his flag? Because if it's just a flag, it wouldn't hold any power over the masses. It wouldn't have the force to move crowds of people, to influence their mood or perspective, or to whip them up into some sort of sexual frenzy, or to act against their own moral judgment or will, because it's just a flag, right?
Talk about the masses.
Yeah, that's powerful.
Lord have mercy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really powerful how in the article you say, Vicki, that they're being manipulated and they don't even know it. Because I think that's where you see that going on in a lot of places. It's not just in the LGBT community. I mean, that we're being manipulated on so many levels. It's ridiculous. You can go to church and get manipulated. You could go to church and find witchcraft right there, right out in praise and worship. You're just being manipulated so much. And you're wondering, why am I getting all this floods of emotion? It's not because of anything really. I mean, it's just there's so much sigil magic going on, and if you have the eyes to see and recognize it, you would be so surprised. I mean,
absolutely, April. I think that's why there's so much direct warning to believers all throughout the Old and New Testament to not make icons of we're not supposed to iconolize things, and it's because there's a lot of symbology in our church that gives us that heightened sense of community and identity that traced all the way back to black magic and occult and Kabbalism and Zoroastrianism. And it's in the church, and that's just a halo over their head and not a sun disk and all this garbage, and it is all over the church.
Yeah, and it goes all the way back to Babylon.
Actually, again, Kenyon College, right? The gates of hell. And that's what Kenyon College is known as across the world. It's known as the gates of hell. So when I went to Kenyon College, I went actually with Russ Disdar's, some of his team members, and we were kind of just hanging out and going out and doing things. And we went to their gallery, and there was child pornography all over the walls in the gallery, actual photographs, like black and white photos, and there was a lot of darkness and symbolism in the pictures as well. And then we went to their chapel, and the chapel had two pulpits, and one of the pulpits was brass, and it was all Masonic symbols. The other pulpit was wood, and it was a carving of a phoenix head, and it was just like all over this place. It was just the occult was all over it, right? And so all of this sigil magic that you it's all over this campus.
And
where is the college located?
It's in Gambier, Ohio.
Okay.
And so well, I mean, I was with Russ Distar's team, right? So they know what to look for, right? So they pointed out, and I'm just blown away. Go ahead, April.
Yeah, it's actually I recently went to the Capitol in DC, and I've seen it before, but I was seeing it with more spiritual eyes, more awakened sense, and I'm walking around, I'm thinking, oh my goodness, from the very start, we've had roots in the occult from the very start. I mean, you look around and you look at the rotunda and everything, and you're like, you can't deny that we've been manipulated from the very start. You can't deny it. Like, the symbology is there. It's everywhere. It looks like a pagan temple from, it's basically a temple. It's a temple.
It is.
And it worships, what it pays homage to is to everything but Yahweh.
Yep.
It's amazing. But if you ever point that out to other people who believe in God and love America, like I love America, but you point that out to them, and they're like, no, and they're just like this.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
How dare you? How dare you? What's wrong with you?
I don't want to bore everybody and turn everything all morose, but one of the things that I've been really pondering lately is, because I've been going through the book of 1st and 2nd Kings a chapter a day with several of my friends, and you're going through king after horrible idolatrous king, and you got one thing going on in Israel, you got a kind of another thing going on in Judah, and it's like the sin of Jeroboam, which they go on and on and on about, which was the litmus test for like how horrible you were, is if you matched Jeroboam. And Jeroboam's sin was worshiping Yahweh the wrong way. He set up a new capital. He picked new dates. He picked new holidays. He brought in 2 golden calves. They were worshiping the right God, but they were bringing all of this garbage into an unsanctioned temple. And it is just, how can we do the same thing right now? We're bringing in all this iconology and garbage into our sanctuaries. It's the sin of Jeroboam. It's worse than the idolatry. It's worshiping Yahweh in the wrong way. And
and you know what, too? So, well, one, Vicki, since you're in 1st and 2nd Kings, watch this morning's show. I was in 1st Kings chapter 22.
Awesome.
Micaiah, I was talking about the Micaiah prophets. But what's important is that we understand that we've all been duped.
Yeah.
We've been bamboozled from the very beginning, just like April said. And those are important words, from the beginning. Yep. We have better realize it, because I'm not one to try to pound things into somebody when I'm convicted of something, right? And so, but I do talk about them, because I want other people to know, if you're convicted about something, hey, guess what? There's probably a purpose for it. But when I started with this whole, and I've told you, Vic, there's things that I recognize that are just, I'm convicted about them. Images, projecting images. That's why I stopped with the green screen. I stopped with the whole green screen thing, with the projecting images behind me. I got a conviction. I went to sleep with a conviction, trying to push it out of my head, because I was like, I'm not, you mean you rid my studio lights, my green screen? I got good software. I paid for that software. I'm using mine, right? But then I woke up with the conviction that I was taking part in a deception if I did it one more time, and that's all I had to hear, because I'd rather hear that than get a spanking from my father. So I got up, I took down the studio lights, I took down that green screen, and that was all she wrote. And now I'm even, I'm even getting convicted about some things.
Yeah.
And I'm starting
to all should be.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Amen.
I love that, David. And I think all of us, I think that we tend in our modern minds to think that there's certain things that God took the time to speak audibly out of his mouth and get written down for all of eternity that are trivial, or that's not important anymore. Oh, that was just for There is nothing in the Word of God that's trivial or that he takes lightly, where we just like, oh, it's not a big deal. We have different rules nowadays, or we figured out sanitation, so we can do this. And what? There's no such thing as a trivial word that's come out of Yahweh's mouth. And so
Amen.
I love the fact, David, that you're up all night haggling over whether or not a projected image behind you on a podcast is something to be questioned. I think if we go to bed at night without something kind of keeping us awake, we're not paying attention, because we're all so out of whack. And we should be, if there's nothing coming to our minds, we should pray and just say, ask God to show us, what am I considering to be light and trivial that is not? Because I think things as simple as that, as simple as like, okay, I felt in the spirit to take that projection down and I'm doing it. That kind of baby step leads to just this snowballing effect of faith and growth and intimacy with Yahweh. And nothing's trivial. Nothing.
No, it's not. If it's heavy on the heart of Yahweh, then it should be heavy on our heart. And and like you said, if he took the time to write it down, if he took the time to give us a story, like from Kings, like you're talking about the sins of Jeroboam, but you're absolutely right. We're literally repeating the sins of ancient Israel. We're no better. In fact, we're worse. Really, if you think about it, we're worse. And if God does not set his order, and I'm careful to say it because I know some people are like, oh, God's not going to judge me, but yes, he is. He's going to judge all of us. If he doesn't take action soon, he owes Israel an apology.
Absolutely.
Because he came down heavy and hard on them. And do you really think that he won't do the same with us?
Amen.
We have to wise up.
Amen, April.
And April, to jump on that, not only Israel, but Sodom and Gomorrah, Adam and Eve, and the whole world when he flooded it. What makes us think that we can get away with our sin and our wickedness after God already judged the world and Sodom and Gomorrah on the Israelites and Adam and Eve? And that's just sad that you can't get the LGBT community to wake up and realize just because you're getting away with it now, it's only because of God's patience and his mercy and his long suffering. But there's going to come a point where he is going to say, I've had enough. And that's why when we sound the alarm, you better take seriously that just because you've been doing it for 5 and 10 years, that God is winking his eye at it or turning away from it. He's patient. He loves us. He wants us to turn from our wickedness and to repent. But I'm guarantee you, the day is coming of where he's going to get your attention and he's going to bring judgment upon you and this land. We must pray for a revival and start seeing a change in this country.
You know how I know?
Amen.
2 Chronicles 7:14.
Yeah, I was just going to say that.
So much in this one passage.
Yes.
So much. He says, if my people, right? Which are now if my people, and not just not the false converts, not the misled, not the unbelievers, my people which are called by my name. Okay, so that clears up anyone saying, well, that's just for the hirelings, the false converts, the wolves in sheep's clothing. No, that's for you. That's for me. If my people, which are called by my name, shall humble themselves. So, how do you humble yourself? Get rid of the pride.
Yep.
Because that's the opposition to pride is humbling yourself,
including gay pride.
Pray. That's right, all pride. And pray. And seek my face, because everyone's busy seeking his hands, right? They want to know what they can get from him. But he doesn't even stop there.
Yeah.
He said, and turn from their wicked ways.
Right.
You know what that told me the first time I read it? What do I need to turn from?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because now I know that just because I'm committing wickedness, I'm engaging in wicked ways, that doesn't mean I'm not one of your own, right? I'm still, his people are going to be engaging in wickedness.
Yeah.
And if they don't, see, you can't turn from your wickedness until you get rid of the pride of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you got to humble yourself. You got to pray, seek his face, and turn from your wicked ways. Then he says, so if and then I will hear from heaven and will forgive their sin and will heal their land. So if you do this, I'll do this.
Right.
If you don't do this,
Yeah.
I ain't going to do this.
Yeah. It's
right?
a contract. That's contract language. That's
Yeah.
another word for covenant. When you're in a covenant, you're in an agreement. It's, you know, the buyer and seller, or however you want it, the two parties. One says, this is my part that I do. I'm responsible for this. But you know what? The contract's null if you're not going to carry out your part. So that, I mean, that denotes that we are responsible for things.
Amen.
You know, I'm not talking about a work salvation, but I'm saying there's things that we have to do, and there's things that many of us, if we're honest, that we did do that was causing our downfall. Like, we wonder why do I keep hitting this glass ceiling? How come I keep trying? And then, because, I mean, look what you're doing. You're literally going opposite of what he said to do. You think you can just approach him the way you want to approach him. You can serve him the way you want to serve him. And you know what? There were people in the Bible that were struck down dead, like dead, because they approached him the way they wanted to approach him. And we've not learned that lesson here in our Judeo-Christian westernized modern America. We don't understand that. But I think
we are so entitled.
We're gonna start learning it, though. We're gonna learn.
Amen, April. That was so well said. And I don't know if I don't think it's ever struck me like it did just now, David, when you read that. He's talking about his people who are called by his name, and then he's immediately attributing wickedness to them.
Yes.
And it's
That's
like,
what gets me.
we have to get over this golden child Christian church, redheaded stepson Israel. The Jews rejected him and we didn't. So now we're in his favor. And like, wicked, like, it's right there. And you can say, well, that's in the Old Testament. So he is talking, like, stop, don't even start with me. Like, my people who are called by my name, knock off, like, purge the wickedness, and I will actually heal your land. So here we sit in a country that's being set on fire and looted, and shops are closing and people are losing their jobs, and we're stuck inside, you know, knitting masks and all this garbage. And here's the formula. But it's a huge, April, like you said with the contract, you know, all we have to do is humble ourselves, pray, seek his face, and turn from our wicked ways. Like, I need another lifetime to accomplish that. But if we would follow that contract, I wonder if this ship in America could turn around at this point.
Exactly.
I think it could, because he says that in the very next paragraph that it would. You know, it's amazing, but it's been prophesied. So you know, there's clues to what we will do. I mean, as individuals, we have the choice to turn. You know, we do have the choice to make those decisions. But as a nation, I can't say what this nation will do, but I can tell you, I know what me and my house will do.
Absolutely. Amen. Amen, April.
You know, if people spent as much time in prayer, on their knees in prayer, praying for this nation, praying that God even moved within the LGBT community and opened their eyes and brought them out of that bondage, as they did watching football games, going to football games, watching Netflix and all of this other stuff, shopping and just sitting around, you know, just doing nonsense. Imagine what
George, what you got against Netflix and football?
Are you watching football, David?
No, I ain't watching no
David,
sports.
You do not watch football. I don't even believe you.
No,
I don't
not
either.
at all.
Thanks, David. My point was we need to pray more and watch less football.
Amen. Amen.
What I always used to laugh at how excited and serious people would get over sports, right? And this is when I was in the world, and how they would get over going to the balls, right? And so a lot of people don't know what the balls are. And so the balls are like contests, really, is what they are. It's like you walk the ball, you go and you walk different categories, and in the homosexual clubs and in the homosexual world, and then they had the book After the Ball and all that kind of nonsense. But and so people, I mean, get like so serious about this, like they will hurt you over sports and clubbing and their car, and So then when I come out of this world, right, I'm like, where are the people who are ready to hurt you for Jesus, right? Where are the people who are willing to get up and stand up and say, no, you're going to have to knock me down if you want me to shut up? Where are them people? You know, that's what I was looking for. When I came out, that's what I was looking for. And, you know, I had my rude awakening because I ended up going into buildings just because they called themselves churches, you know. But if I didn't, I never would have been able to spend the time that I did with the Father, right? And learn that those buildings were not the church, that the church was us, that the church is us, that it's in us, and that we assemble to become the church, right? And so if I would never would have learned all that. So, you know, there's wisdom in every which way we take and every which step we go. And when we step off the path, there's going to be a lesson there, you know, and so we better get back on the path. And when we get back on the path, we can tell everybody that's still on the path what we learned when we just stepped off the path. So hopefully they won't step off the path, you know, and everybody that's off the path, hopefully they can hear our voices from the path and they'll know that they need to get onto the path, right? And get out of the weeds, get out of the poison ivy, because that's the best way I can explain what living in the world is like. You know, like there is a narrow path that is clear, and everything around it is dangerous.
And my goodness, that path is so narrow.
Yes, it is so.
The longer I stay on it, the longer I realize it's so narrow. No wonder why hardly, Jesus says, hardly anybody finds it.
And it gets narrower.
We're walking sideways.
I gotta say, guys, I have got to jet because I have a baby that needs me right now.
Okay, that's all right. We are at the bottom.
I love you guys all, and this has been really great. I got
good to see you, April.
So.
Bye, April.
Right. Love you, April.
Bye,
love
guys.
you.
Bye.
Yeah, so we are at the top of our second hour anyway, and we're just gonna wrap it up. And we didn't really get into, well, we got into a whole lot everywhere. So
it was good. It was chat.
Really good, and I'd much rather do that than.
Well, it's better to let the Holy Spirit lead, and I felt the Holy Spirit led. I felt good show.
Yes, he most certainly did.
Amen. It's good to hear your thoughts, George. You've got a lot. You got a lot of insight, and so I'm glad that you were sharing so much tonight.
No, I appreciated everything everyone said. I always learn and grow as well.
Me too.
It's just good to get information and knowledge and insight and a different perspective on others and their journey. You know,
absolutely,
Amen.
Absolutely.
And how they interpret it.
That's what really gets me is that, you know, a lot of us, like George and April and me, have been a part of the same movement, but so very different. You know, even a lot of the transgenders that have come out, that my testimony and their testimony and our past is very, very, very similar, but so different, right? And even their walk now is so different, you know, than my walk. And it's because it's their walk, right? And so I guess like sometimes what I get to see are people, younger people, coming out of the movement, wanting their walk to be like my walk, right? Wanting their walk. I mean, they're like 6 weeks in and they want to, they're just ready to get on the stage and speak to crowds and lay hands on, and, you know, and all that kind of zeal is amazing, and it's a blessing. But even when Paul, you know, who was Saul and persecuted the church, and he did so sincerely, he was sincerely wrong, and then he was sincerely knocked off his high horse and blinded so he could see, and he became sincerely right. even him, with all of the knowledge and wisdom that he had of the scriptures and of God, right? He still had to take time to either unlearn what he learned or relearn or learn new or see it in a true light, see it all with clarity, see it for its true perception, right? It's like the truth. And so, but he had to take the time to do that before he dove into his ministry, his new ministry.
But the key thing to that, David, was that he had to get to a place of humility, and God brought him to that place.
That's right. That's
and
right.
that humility, well, it's difficult, but it really does. Once you are humbled and you're forced to just look at the fact that, you know what, I really don't know everything, and I need to get off my high horse. I need to start listening, searching for information, listening to God, asking questions, praying, asking for the leading and the guidance of the Holy Spirit. So many wonderful things that can help us get on that path. And I believe God is very faithful and true and just and patient. Thank God he's patient.
Oh, man.
And,
but I tell you what,
to get here,
because a lot of things that I experience and get to see is, I think one of the most important, and for me, like humbling things, is that even when we think we've got it, we don't get it, you know? And so I love when I get that. I do. I love when I get that sense of, I got that, because I know I don't, right? And so it's like an immediate struggle within me, because I always look back to that moment when I was laying on my deathbed and I was just like reading the word, right? And it's coming alive, and it is alive, and it's coming alive to me. And I just remember that moment when I realized all I had to do was put down my pride, was humble myself and say, everything I've said, everything I've done, and the way I've been living is wrong.
Right. Correct.
All I had to do was that. That was the hardest part.
I said that all you had to do.
Yeah. But it's the hardest part, but it's the easiest to do. You know, if that makes any sense. Because it's so hard in our minds that I think that we build ourselves up to fear doing it.
Right. Oh yeah.
But it's so quick and easy to do once we actually do it, that we, if we could, we'd kick ourselves in the rear because we didn't do it sooner. You know.
May I?
Yes, you may add. Go ahead.
All right, I'm going to add. You know, when you spend so much of your life trying to be a control freak and you don't want to rely on God, for me, when you truly just surrender it all to God and trust him and stop fighting with him, stop fighting with the world, there's a peace that just that at least it came over me to where I no longer feel this need to try to prove anything to anyone or even to myself. All that matters is each day I just want to make sure that I'm in alignment with God's will and hopefully doing my best to please him. It's not always easy, but there's a peace, and I can't describe it. There's something that God gives you to where you finally are resting in him. I don't know how to describe it. And that's why I have no desire to go back into the world to do anything. And there's nothing about it that appeals to me. It's so nice to be out of bondage and out of misery and out of worldly stuff when none of it was fulfilling and satisfying. And I never could grasp or get through my thick head that Jesus could actually fill that void. But boy, is it a great place when you get there.
Amen. Amen. I just feel compelled to add, you know, David, just when you were talking about that, all I had to do, but it was this huge thing. It's a very paralyzing moment, regardless of whatever that old man is that you have to put to death. And it just makes me think of Nebuchadnezzar, who built an entire kingdom on his pride. And one day he was like, look at this great kingdom that I have built. And he was struck with insanity and went out and acted like a wild animal for seven years out in the wilds, eating grass. And he was so out of his mind that he couldn't even cry out to God. He couldn't even formulate a sentence and say, help me. And I love this passage. It said, then one day he looked up. And God came and restored him to his sanity, and his life changed, and his kingdom was restored. And so for those of you out there who might be listening to this, who say, I cannot do this. I built my whole life on this. It's my identity. There's no way I could start over. There's no way I can look my Christian parents in the eye and hear that I told you so. Whatever it is that you're fighting with, just look up. You don't even try to formulate anything. Don't try to come up with some beautifully sculpted prayer. Just look up and just see if his mighty hand will do the rest for you.
It's worth it. It really is.
Amen. Wow.
Amen.
So I'm sure we could go till 10, but
I've got some chicken waiting for me.
well, maybe we can go to 9:55 since we know we can keep George from his chicken.
Well, I'll just eat my chicken while
there you go. Or you'll pull an April and say, "Hey, I gotta go, y'all."
Yeah, I got a
That's
baby.
right.
Waiting on me.
I got a baby.
I got a chicken waiting on me.
I got a Cornish game hen waiting for me. Oh man.
Oh man. Hey guys, thank you so much. April, I know you're not on, but thank you, sister. We appreciate you. George, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks to everyone for 2 hours of your time and participation. Absolutely. We love you.
Amen. And Tracy, just know that we love you. And I did get your email, and it's all good. I'm just blown away, and I can't wait for more. So I love you, sister. Chance,
Tracy,
Ellie Jean, love you.
Tracy, I'm so happy for you.
Amen. 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 And George, you got an email waiting for you. Somebody wanted to be introduced to you so you can be on her show. So I just hooked that up while Vicki was reading her article. But
okay,
I love you guys, and I appreciate you all. And Lord willing, I'll see you in the morning. But we will definitely, Lord willing, see y'all next Tuesday on Dry Bones. And
bye, April. Bye, David.
Humility versus pride. That's what we're doing all week, all month, all week, all month. All right. I'm out of here for real this time. Peace.
Goodbye.